2 years after my divorce, my ex-husband's sister saw me at the clinic and smirked. He finally got a real wife. Your cousin is pregnant with his son. I just said, are you sure about that? Minutes later, the doctor walked in with the test results, and her smirk vanished. My name is Maeve Ellison. I am 35 years old. I am a nurse practitioner at a women's health clinic in the city where I have lived for 8 years, the city where I met Conrad Mercer and married him, and spent 4 years learning that a person can be both present in a life and absent from it simultaneously, and the city where I have rebuilt, slowly and without announcement, in the 2 years since the divorce was finalized. If you are new here, welcome, and if you have not already subscribed, please do. We are just getting started. Let me take you back. I became a nurse practitioner because of waiting rooms, not in a general sense, in a specific sense. The specific sense of a Tuesday afternoon when I was 22 years old and my mother had a diagnosis that required monitoring, and I was the one who sat beside her in the specialist's waiting area every 6 weeks for 2 years, because my mother did not absorb medical information well when she was frightened. And she was always frightened at these appointments, and she needed someone beside her who could hear what the doctor said and translate it into language she could carry home. I learned to read those rooms. I learned what a physician's expression means when he comes out of a consultation and the news is manageable versus when it is not. I learned which questions to ask and when to ask them, and how to ask in a way that produced real answers rather than managed ones. I sat in plastic chairs under fluorescent lights twice a month for 2 years, and I paid attention with everything I had, because attention was the only thing I could give my mother that cost me nothing and helped her everything. She recovered. I kept the last appointment card from the specialist, a small paper rectangle, the clinic's name printed at the top, the date and time handwritten in the scheduling nurse's script. I do not know exactly why I kept it. I put it in my wallet and it has been there since I was 24, slipped behind my library card, and I have moved it from wallet to wallet through every version of my adult life without making a deliberate decision to keep it. It is simply there. It has always been there. I chose nursing because of those rooms. I chose the women's health specialty because of my mother specifically. Because what I had watched her navigate, the fear and the information asymmetry and the specific vulnerability of a woman in a medical setting who does not have someone beside her who knows what the words mean, was something I understood from the inside. I wanted to be the person on the other side of it. The one who held the information. The one who translated. I have worked at this clinic for 5 years. My gross salary is $67,400 a year, which after tax and insurance deductions comes to approximately $4,210 a month. My rent is $1,380 for a 1-bedroom apartment 12 minutes from the clinic by car. Not a large apartment, not a remarkable one, but mine in the specific way of a space you have furnished slowly and deliberately over several years. My student loan repayment is $310 a month, 6 years remaining on a balance that started larger and has been declining with the specific patience of someone who does not think about the original number because the original number is not useful information. My insurance and licensing fees together run $335 a month, which is the administrative cost of being a medical professional, and which I pay without drama because it is a fixed expense, and I am a person who plans for fixed expenses. What remains after the fixed costs is $185 a month that goes into a savings account I am rebuilding from scratch. The legal fees for the divorce consumed 2 years of savings in 4 months. I had built an emergency fund carefully over 3 years, and it is gone, and I have started again from the number that was left when the attorneys finished. which was $1,200. I do not tell people this. It is not a secret, exactly. It is just not information I have found a use for sharing. I am a person who rebuilds quietly. I have been doing it since I was 22. The appointment card is still in my wallet. I met Conrad Mercer at 30. At a mutual friends gathering, where he was the person who refilled my glass without asking, and then stayed to talk about something I actually cared about. He was good at the beginning, attentive, warm, the specific quality of interesting that requires the other person to keep showing up. I married him at 31 and spent the first year believing the attentiveness was his baseline and the second year beginning to understand that it was his best effort, and the third year understanding that the distance between someone's baseline and their best effort is where marriages either adapt or dissolve. He was not a cruel person. I want to say that clearly, because this story could read as though he was, and the truth is more complicated and less dramatic. He was a person who moved toward ease when ease was available, which meant he moved toward me when I was providing ease and moved toward other priorities when I required something from him. The movement was not malicious, it was just the direction he moved. I spent 4 years in a marriage where I was the person who held things, and he was the person the things were held for, and I did not name that for a very long time, because naming it would have required me to make a decision I was not ready to make. His sister Sable told me, at the wedding toast, what the next 4 years were going to require. She stood at the reception microphone with a glass of champagne and the specific smile of someone delivering a performance they have prepared and are proud of. She said, "Conrad has always been someone who knows what he wants, even when the rest of us weren't sure. We always wondered what he was really looking for." She paused. She looked at me. She said, "Tonight I think we're all still figuring it out together." She raised her glass. She sat down. 80 guests raised their glasses. The thing about a toast like that one is that it requires everyone in the room to decide, in real time, whether to name what they heard or to let it go, and almost everyone lets it go, because naming it requires a kind of social courage that most people do not have at someone else's wedding reception. My mother squeezed my hand under the table. She did not say anything. The friend beside me made a comment about the centerpieces. The moment passed into the category of things that are witnessed and not named, which is where Sable had intended to put it. I smiled the smile I had prepared for that evening, which was real but not complete, and I did not forget a word of what Sable had said. Not the phrasing, and not the pause, and not the way she looked at me when she said "still figuring it out." I filed it the way I file things that I do not yet know what to do with. I filed it, and I continued. For 4 years I continued, and for 4 years the filing cabinet in my mind collected entries in the Sable category that I reviewed occasionally and acted on never. Because acting on them would have required naming something I was not ready to name about the marriage they were attached to. In the first year, she commented, at a family dinner, that my work schedule was very demanding for a marriage. She said it to the table, not to me specifically, in the tone of an observation. In the second year, she told Conrad, within my hearing, that she worried he was giving more than he was getting. Conrad said, "He was fine. He was fine. I was the one providing, but I was fine too." Which is a sentence that requires some unpacking that I will not do here. In the third year, at Christmas, she gave me a cookbook and told me Conrad had always loved home cooking. I said thank you and put it in the bag with the other gifts, and when we got home, I put it on the shelf in the kitchen where it sat for 8 months before I donated it. Because I cook from recipes on my phone, and I always have, and she knew this because she had been to my kitchen 4 times. Conrad was freelance for the first 2 years of the marriage, project income, variable. The kind of financial structure that works when the projects are regular and becomes a different problem when they are not. I covered the health insurance for both of us, $340 a month, two-person enrollment, paid without discussion, because I was the one with the employer plan, and that was the practical solution. The practical solution was always my register. I operated in it without requiring acknowledgement. When Conrad's projects ran thin for 5 months in the second year, I picked up weekend shifts at the clinic, 8 shifts across those months, each one a Saturday or Sunday at the nurse's station, while he was at home managing the gap between what he was earning and what we needed. I did not tell him I was doing it for this reason. I said, the clinic needed coverage. The clinic did need coverage. I did not tell him the other part, which is that I had looked at the numbers and they did not work without the additional income, and I was the one who looked at numbers and made them work. Sable came to dinner during those months twice. She was warm to Conrad. She was pleasant to me in the measure I had learned to recognize. The measure exactly sufficient to produce no complaint and exactly insufficient to produce any warmth. I told myself this was simply her way. I had been telling myself this for 2 years, and I was good at it, the way you become good at explanations that protect you from the conclusions they are protecting you from. I should tell you about Delia before I tell you what happened next. I should tell you about Delia before I tell you about what happened next, because what happened next requires the Delia I knew before it, and the Delia I knew before it is someone specific. Delia is my cousin, my mother's sister's daughter, 32 years old, 2.5 years younger than me. We grew up 15 minutes apart and spent enough of our childhood in the same spaces that she knows things about me that require years to know, how I sound when I am actually fine versus performing fine, which stories I tell to deflect and which ones I tell because I trust the room, the specific register of my voice when something has hurt me that I have not yet decided to name. I taught her to drive when she was 17 and I was 19. She was terrified of the highway, not of driving in general, of the speed specifically. The way the cars came up beside you and passed, and the guardrail was close, and there was no margin. She gripped the wheel with both hands and her shoulders came up toward her ears, and she could not relax them no matter how many times I said to relax them. I did not tell her to relax. I held the door handle on the passenger side, not because I was frightened, but because my hand on the door gave her something to locate. Her instructor was in the car. The instructor was calm. The door was closed. The situation was contained. I held the door handle for 30 miles, while her shoulders came down slowly and her grip loosened, and the highway became something she could be on, rather than something that was happening to her. She cried a little when we got off the exit. Not from fear. From the specific relief of having done the thing she was afraid of. She was a bridesmaid at my wedding. She knew every version of my marriage that I had words for, and some I did not. She was the person I called on the nights when the distance between the Conrad I had married and the Conrad I was living with had become wide enough to be frightening. This is the person who is now in a relationship with my ex-husband and pregnant with what Sable called his son. I found out 6 weeks before the clinic, not from Delia. From a mutual friend who assumed I already knew, which is how certain pieces of information arrive, packaged in the assumption of prior knowledge, delivered with the casual weight of old news. I sat with it for the first week without telling anyone. In the second week, I told my closest colleague at the clinic, Janet, who said that's a specific kind of awful, and brought me coffee the next morning without mentioning it again, which was exactly the right response. I did not call Delia. I thought about it for the first 4 days, what I would say, whether there was a version of that conversation that produced anything useful, whether she would answer. I decided against it not because I had nothing to say, but because everything I had to say was something she already knew, and calling to say the things she already knew would only have been for my benefit, and I was not sure my benefit was sufficient reason. I did not call Conrad. We had been careful with each other since the divorce. Not hostile. Careful. In the way of people who have shared something significant and are now managing the distance between the sharing and whatever comes next. I had his number, and he had mine, and the number had been used twice in 2 years, both times for administrative reasons, and I did not use it for this. I did not call Sable. Sable called me, or rather texted, in week 3, on a Wednesday evening when I was at the nurse's station finishing a chart, and the text said, "Just wanted you to know, Conrad is really happy. Thought you'd want that for him." I read it once. I took a screenshot. I placed the phone face down beside my keyboard and I finished the chart, which took 11 minutes, and when I picked the phone back up, I did not open the text again. The screenshot is in a folder on my phone, labeled with the date it arrived, which is what I do with things I do not yet know what to do with. I keep them in a dated folder, and I do not delete them, and I do not act on them until I understand what action they require. What the text required, I understood later, was nothing. It was a flag planted, not a question asked. It was Sable establishing position, the way she had always established position, pleasantly, warmly, in a register that made objection difficult while making the content of the message impossible to miss. She was not sharing news. She was measuring whether I had conceded the ground. I had not conceded the ground. I had simply moved to different ground, which is not the same thing. What she did not know, what none of them knew, not Sable, and not Conrad, and not Delia, who I think about least often and most specifically, which is its own kind of strange, was that I had stopped needing to measure. I had the appointment card in my wallet. I had the clinic at 7:45 and the nurse's station and Dr. Osei and Janet, and the patients whose information I held carefully every day, and the work that had been mine before any of them arrived in my life, and would be mine after. I had rebuilt from $1,200 before. I knew how. Let me tell you what the divorce cost. In numbers. Because numbers are the language I use when the other language is too imprecise. Conrad was covered under my health insurance for 4 years of marriage, $340 a month, 48 months, $16,320 of premium, paid for a plan that covered both of us until it covered only me. He did not ask me to cover him. I offered, because I had the plan and he did not, and offering was the practical solution. It was also the kind of offering that becomes invisible over time, that moves from a choice into a background condition that nobody examines, because it has always been there, and things that have always been there stop being visible as decisions. The weekend shifts, 4 months, 8 shifts, each one a day. I was at work while he was at home, with the irregular income situation that was not being resolved. I did not calculate the dollar value of those days at the time. I calculate it now, for the purposes of being honest, 8 shifts at my shift rate. Approximately $1,100 I earned during a period when I was already working full-time, because the household needed it. The emergency fund, 3 years of building, starting from zero at 27, contributing $200 a month when I could, and more when I had more. Reaching a total of $8,400 by the time the divorce conversations began. Legal fees consumed $7,200 of that in the 4 months between the first conversation and the finalized decree. I paid for my own attorney. Conrad paid for his. We were equitable about this in the specific way of people who had agreed, by the end. That equitable was the only register left. What remained when the attorneys finished was $1,200. I found the appointment card in my wallet during the second week after the settlement while I was looking for my debit card at a pharmacy. I pulled everything out of the card slot, and there it was, the specialist clinic name, the handwritten date from 11 years ago. The scheduling nurse's script I had not thought about in years. I looked at it for a moment at the pharmacy counter. The person behind me in line was patient. I put the card back, found the debit card, paid for what I was buying. I drove home and I sat in my car in the parking lot for a few minutes before I went in. Not because I was not ready to go in, but because I was thinking about the waiting rooms at 22, and the appointment card, and the $1,200 in the savings account, and the fact that I had survived something that required everything I had before, and that I was here, and that here was going to have to be enough to build from. It was enough. I have been building. On the morning of the Tuesday in question, I got to the clinic at 7:45 for an 8 o'clock shift. I changed into my scrubs in the locker room. I put my wallet in my locker and my phone in my scrub pocket, and I clipped my badge to the lanyard, the navy one, 3 years old, slightly frayed at the loop where it connects to the clip. My name. My title. My photograph from the day I started, which is slightly more formal than I would choose now, but which I have not replaced because replacing it requires paperwork, and the current one is legible. My wallet fell open when I was putting it in the locker. The card slot faced out. I could see the edge of the appointment card from where I was standing, not the writing, just the corner of it. The color of the cardstock, slightly yellowed now at the edges. I tucked the wallet in and closed the locker and went to the nurse's station. The morning was what mornings at the clinic are: patient charts to pull, the schedule to review, the overnight notes from the on-call. I was 2 hours into the shift when Dr. Osei came to the nurse's station with a folder. Dr. Osei and I have worked together for 5 years. He is a careful physician and a precise communicator, and when he has something complicated to convey, he conveys it in the specific way of someone who has thought about the words before he says them. He set the folder on the station counter and said he had a case that morning with a complication in the results, nothing alarming, but something the patient needed to be informed of before she left. He said the dating on the ultrasound did not align with the conception timeline the patient had reported on intake by approximately 6 weeks. He said it the way he says clinical things, factually, without editorializing, with the professional neutrality that is its own form of care. He did not know the patient's name meant anything to me. The intake forms come through the system alphabetically, and I had not reviewed that section of the morning's schedule. I looked at the name on the folder. I looked at it for 2 seconds, which is the amount of time it takes to read a name you recognize and understand what the recognition means. Then I said, "Thank you, Dr. Osei. I'll update the chart on my end." He nodded and took the folder and walked to the exam room, and I stood at the nurse's station with the information that the pregnancy my cousin was carrying did not begin when she had told people it began. The conception timeline, by 6 weeks, did not align with the period during which Sable had been building his son narrative. I stood at the nurse's station for another moment. Then I went back to my charts. I had 3 patients to see before lunch, and the clinic does not pause for the specific quality of Tuesday it was becoming. 20 minutes later, I stepped out of an exam room to retrieve a patient file, and Sable Mercer was standing in the entrance of my clinic. She saw me immediately. The entrance and the hallway of this clinic have a direct sightline. It is a building I know in the specific way you know a building you have spent 5 years in, which means I know where the light lands in the afternoon, and which door has the hinge that sticks, and the exact angle at which the entrance is visible from the nurse's station and from the hallway outside exam room 3. I was in the hallway. She was at the entrance. There was no version of her arrival in which she did not see me. I watched her see me. I watched her eyes move to the badge, read it, move back to my face. I watched the calculation happen. She was taking in the name and the title and the department notation and the photograph, and she was filing all of it. And then she took a breath and she crossed the floor. She did not have to cross it. The waiting area check-in was to her left. She could have guided Delia to the reception desk without passing through the hallway at all. She chose the hallway. She chose the crossing. The crossing was the decision that made everything that followed possible, and it was entirely hers. I did not move toward her. I did not move back. I stood where I was and I waited, and she covered the 20 feet between us with the specific ease of someone who has been looking forward to this. "Maeve," she said. The warmth was in place. She kept it available. Her warmth, like a tool she reached for when it served a function. "I didn't expect to see you here." She had expected to see me here. She had known I worked at this clinic for 5 years. Conrad had known. Delia had known. She had referred to my clinic by name once, 2 years before any of this, when we were still the version of cousins who shared information about our lives. The name on my badge was the same name that had been on 4 years of shared accounts and holiday cards, and the wedding invitation that had gone to everyone in the Mercer family, including Sable, who had framed it on her desk for a year before she took it down. She had expected to see me, and she had come anyway, and the floor between the entrance and the hallway was the length of a decision she had made in advance. "Sable," I said. She let the warmth shift into the thing it had been covering, something brighter and more deliberate, the expression of a person arriving at the line they have been preparing to deliver. She said it. "He finally got a real wife. Your cousin is pregnant with his son." 7 words, flat, certain, not volume. Not heat. The tone of something announced rather than argued, the register of a person who has said a true thing and expects it to do the work of a true thing. She said it, and she waited. I knew what she was waiting for. She had delivered this line in other rooms before this one. I could tell by the ease of it, the practiced brightness, the specific quality of someone who knows their timing. She was waiting for the landing. She was watching my face for the moment the information arrived and did what information like this is supposed to do. I looked at her. "Are you sure about that?" I said. I said it in the clinical register. Quiet, level, the voice I use when I am asking a question the answer to which I already know, and am asking because the asking is part of the process. Not a bluff, not a performance. A question that happened to be accurate, delivered in the way I deliver accurate things, without announcement. She laughed. Short, dismissive, the laugh of someone who has decided the question is beneath the conversation. "I think I know what I'm talking about." She glanced toward the waiting area, the slight movement of someone checking the room to make sure the audience was present for what she was doing. The audience was present. The waiting area was visible from the hallway. There were 4 people in it. Sable had delivered that line in 4 other rooms before this one. I could tell by the ease of it. The practiced brightness, the way she waited after the laugh for me to do what I had always done, which was absorb it. In the toast, and in the dinners, and in the Wednesday text, she had said her piece, and I had absorbed it, and continued, and this hallway was the latest room, and the room was holding still, and waiting for me to absorb it again. I did not absorb it, I said. Then I would wait a moment. If I were you. Something moved behind her eyes. Not collapse, recalibration. She was trying to determine whether I knew something specific or was producing the performance of knowing something, which is a calculation she was making without access to the nurse's station 20 minutes ago, and without access to the folder Dr. Osei had been carrying, and without access to the number 6 weeks, which was sitting in my mind with the specific weight of clinical information I had processed and not yet acted on. She had only the hallway. She had her line. She had the certainty she had walked in with. The exam room door opened. Dr. Osei came out with the folder. He looked down the hallway and found the patient, Delia, not Sable, and he said, in the careful professional register of someone who has composed his words in advance, "I need a moment with you before you leave. There's something in the results we should go over." He did not look at me. He did not look at Sable. He was doing his job in the way he always does it, which is directly and without editorializing, with the specific professional neutrality that is its own form of care. Delia came out behind him. She looked at the folder. She did not look at me. She did not look at Sable. She looked at the folder with the expression of someone who has arrived at an appointment and is waiting for what the appointment contains. What it contained, the ultrasound dating on the results did not align with the conception timeline Delia had reported on intake. By approximately 6 weeks. The pregnancy was approximately 6 weeks earlier than the timeline she had provided, which meant it was approximately 6 weeks earlier than the period during which Conrad Mercer had become relevant to Delia's life. Dr. Osei said all of this in the way he says things, which is precisely and without commentary. He said what the results showed. He said what the discrepancy meant for the dating. He said there were next steps and he would outline them. He said it all in the hallway because Delia had come out of the exam room and the hallway was where we all were. The hallway was very quiet while he spoke. Sable said, "That doesn't change anything. He loves Delia. This is his family now." She said it fast, before the hallway had settled, before the information had landed fully in the room, because filling the silence was the only move she had, and she took it. She said it in the voice of someone who has found new ground and is testing whether it will hold. And what she said while testing it revealed everything she had come here to accomplish. She needed me to accept the demotion. Maeve, the first wife. The insufficient one. The one replaced by something real. She had crossed the floor in my clinic on my shift to establish the new order, and she needed me to accept the terms, and the results had made the terms unacceptable. She said that doesn't change anything, and it went into the hallway, and the hallway heard it. From the waiting area, around the corner, the room partially visible through the doorway, came a voice. An older woman, unhurried, addressing no one in particular. "Yes, it does, honey. That's why they call them results." A pause. The sound of a magazine page turning. She did not look up from the magazine. I looked at Sable. "The results are real," I said. "That's the part that doesn't change." Her hand moved to her bag strap, the specific grip of someone whose hands have run out of prepared positions and have located an object to anchor to. Her voice had the quality of something still moving after the ground has stopped, the momentum of a performance that has run past the moment it was designed for. My hands were at my sides. My badge was on my chest where it had been since 7:45. My voice was at the same level it had been all shift. She was reaching for something to hold on to, and I was simply standing in the hallway of my own clinic, and the difference between those two things was the whole story. Delia had not spoken. She was standing beside Dr. Osei with her hands at her sides and her eyes at a point on the wall between the exam room door and the window, and she did not look at me, and she did not look at Sable, and she said nothing at all. Of everyone in the hallway, she was the only one who said nothing, and her silence was more complete and more honest than anything Sable had said, and I noticed it, and I did not mention it. because it was not mine to mention. She was the cousin who had held the passenger door for 30 miles. Whatever she was carrying right now, she was carrying it in the same way she had always carried difficult things, quietly, with her hands at her sides, looking at a fixed point until the shaking stopped. I understood her. I did not say so. Sable left first. She walked to the exit with the posture of someone who has not lost something and is demonstrating this by the quality of their exit. Delia followed her. After a moment, after Dr. Osei had finished and she had said something quiet to him that I could not hear. She did not look at me on the way out. I did not look at her specifically, though I was aware of her passing. The hallway returned to what hallways return to when the loudest moment has passed. The regular clinical sounds, the PA system, the door to the waiting area. Someone at the nurse's station 2 rooms down talking about a chart. I went back to work. I had 2 more patients before lunch, and neither of them had anything to do with any of this, and I saw them in the same way I see all of them. With the attention the information required, and the care the situation warranted, and the professional neutrality I have been building since I was 22 in a waiting room with my mother. Dr. Osei found me at the nurse's station at 12:15. He set a chart down, and then he stood there for a moment, which was unusual. He is not someone who stands at the station without a purpose, and he said, "I didn't know she was going to be here today. I would have told you sooner if I had." He meant the patient. He meant the folder. He meant the specific Tuesday it had become and what it would have been useful to know before it became it. He was telling me that if he had known the personal dimension of the case he was carrying, he would have found a way to prepare me for it, because we have worked together for 5 years and he is a person who would do that. I looked at my chart. I said, "Thank you, Dr. Osei." He nodded and went back to his office, and I went back to my chart, and the afternoon became the afternoon. At 3:15, Janet, who has been at this clinic for 8 years and has the specific quality of someone who notices what happens in the rooms she works in and does not editorialize about it unless invited, put a coffee on the edge of my desk without breaking her stride. She set it down and kept walking, and then she paused and said, over her shoulder, "Interesting Tuesday." I looked at the coffee. I said, "That's one word for it." She said, "I've got a few others." She did not say them. She went back to her station. I laughed. A small one, brief, the kind that comes before you decide to allow it. The kind that comes when someone who is in the same building as your Tuesday names it without requiring you to narrate it. The results meant what they meant, and I will say it plainly because the plainness is the point. The pregnancy predated the relationship by 6 weeks. The conception timeline that Delia had reported on her intake form did not align with the dating the ultrasound produced, and the gap was 6 weeks, and 6 weeks before the relationship that Sable had been building the real family narrative around meant the pregnancy did not belong to that narrative in the way the narrative required. His son was built on a timeline the medical record did not support. I am a person who works with medical records. I know what it means when the documentation does not support the claim. It means the claim requires revision. What happened with Conrad and Delia in the weeks after the clinic is information I received secondhand in the way certain information arrives. Through the mutual friend who had told me about the relationship in the first place, who called me a month later with the update in the same tone she had used for the original news, which was the tone of someone who understood she was carrying something heavy and was being careful with it. I will not reconstruct the detail, because the detail is not mine, and it is not the story. What I know is that the narrative Sable had been building, the real wife, the real son, the new order, collapsed in the specific way of narratives that are built on timelines that do not survive documentation. The documentation survived. The narrative did not. Sable's social media went quiet in the weeks following. The posts that had been positioning Delia as replacement and family growing and the new chapter, they stopped. I did not track the stopping in real time. I noticed it one evening when I opened the app for something unrelated and found nothing new in the account I had not unfollowed because unfollowing required a decision and I had not made it. The absence was its own data point. I noted it and moved on. Delia did not contact me. I have been waiting, without urgency, to see if she will, and I have been equally prepared for the possibility that she will not. The silence between us is not the silence of estrangement exactly. It is the silence of two people who have known each other since childhood and who have, in the past year, done something to each other that does not have a clean name yet. She taught me that holding your breath on the highway is not the same as being safe. I held the door handle for 30 miles so her hands could stop shaking. I do not know how you hold what we hold and also hold what happened, and I suspect she does not know either, and the not knowing is where we both are currently. She knows where I work. She knows my phone number. The silence, for now, is the answer. I made one decision in the weeks after the clinic, and it was not about Sable, or Conrad, or Delia. It was about the senior NP position that had been posted internally at the clinic for 2 months, a role I had been qualified for since before the divorce and had not applied for because the timing had been wrong and the energy had been elsewhere, and the version of me who had been showing up to the clinic for the last year had been a reduced version. The version that handles what must be handled and conserves the rest. The Tuesday had changed something about the conservation, not dramatically. I am not a person who changes dramatically. But something that had been held aside came back into availability, a quality of forward-looking that I had been without for longer than I had realized. And I recognized it when it arrived because I had felt it before, in the parking lot after the pharmacy and the appointment card and the $1,200, the moment I understood that here was going to be enough to build from. I submitted the application on a Thursday evening at my kitchen table with the patient files from the day closed and a cup of tea going warm beside me. I did not tell anyone until the interview was scheduled. The interview was scheduled the following week. I went in ready. That is all I will say about it. I went in ready. 6 weeks after the Tuesday in question, on an unremarkable Wednesday morning in early winter, I arrived at the clinic at 7:40 before the shift started, which is a habit I have maintained since my 2nd year here. 20 minutes before the department fills is the time that belongs to me. The time when the charts are mine alone and the hallways are quiet and the building is not yet doing the thing it does all day, which is hold people in various states of need and information and fear and relief. My bag was on the chair beside my desk. My wallet was in the bag. The appointment card was in the wallet, where it has been for 11 years, behind the library card, slightly yellowed at the cardstock edges, the handwriting of a scheduling nurse I never knew the name of, preserved in blue ink on a small rectangle of paper that I have carried through every version of my adult life without a deliberate decision to carry it. I took it out that morning. I held it for a moment. The specialist clinic name at the top. The handwritten date from 11 years ago. The time of the appointment, which I still remember because we were always early. My mother preferred to be early in case parking was difficult, in case something went wrong, in case any of the things she worried about happened and we needed the extra time. We were always 15 minutes early. I always had the card in my hand when we walked in. She recovered. She has been recovered for 8 years. She does not think about those appointments often, she tells me, because recovered people move forward, and that is what recovery is for. I think about them sometimes. Not with grief. with the specific gratitude of someone who understands that what they learned in those rooms became who they are, and who they are has been useful in ways they could not have anticipated when they were 22 and frightened in a plastic chair. I put the card back in the wallet. I put the wallet in my bag. I pulled up the day's first chart and reviewed the morning schedule, and when Dr. Osei arrived at 7:55, I was already at the nurse's station, and when Janet arrived at 8 with her coffee and the particular quality of unhurried competence that has made her the clinic's institutional memory for 8 years, the department became what it is when it is working, which is a place where the information is held carefully by people who have chosen to hold it, for people who need it. That is the plain description of what we do here. I chose it at 22 in a waiting room, and I have been choosing it every shift since, and the choosing has not stopped feeling like the right choice, which is not something everyone gets to say about their work, and which I do not take for granted. Dr. Osei stopped at my station mid-morning and told me, in the way he tells things, that the senior NP role search had concluded. I will not tell you the outcome of that sentence, because the telling would require me to make more of it than it should be made of right now, and it is too new for that. I will tell you that I drove home from the clinic that evening with the windows down despite the cold, which is a thing I do when something has happened that I have not yet found the language for, and the air is a useful substitute for language. I sat at my kitchen table when I got home and I ate the dinner I had made, and I looked out the window at the street that had been my street for 2 years. Since the apartment that had been ours became the apartment that was mine, and I did not think about Conrad or Sable or the hallway or the results or the timeline. I thought about the waiting room at 22 and my mother's hand in mine and the scheduling nurse's handwriting and the specific weight of the card that has been in my wallet since then. And I thought about what it means to carry something so long that the carrying becomes invisible, and then one day you take it out and look at it and understand that it was never weight at all. It was the reason. You can love someone for a long time and still know when to stop standing on ground that was never solid. If this story found you, please share it. Like and subscribe if you have not already. This channel is for the people who learned, in waiting rooms and hallways and quiet Tuesdays, that the information is the power. There are more stories. I will keep telling them.